In this video, I'm going to be discussing batch processing with Easy Composites version 2. I'll be using the double featured center template, and I'll be creating these two composites in batch. If you have not yet watched the prior video where I use this same template and discuss data files for creating single composites without a batch, watch that video first because there is a whole lot of information in there, and I'm not going to be repeating all of that in this video. So if you've not watched that video, you may get lost in this video, or there may be some things that you don't understand with the data file because it's all discussed in the prior video. So let's switch over to the data file here. And in the prior video, I discussed setting all of these items up. For batch processing, it's the same exact thing to use the data file compared to just running a single template, with the exception that you have to have the group ID column filled out, because this group ID column is how it's going to know how to group the images. So one composite, for example, Mr. Reynolds class will be in these rows, and then Miss Sanders class will be in these rows. So it's going to group based on that group ID. Now, it does not matter what the text in that column is. It could be anything. You could just use the number 1 and group them all this way. However, it will name your files based on the text here. So if you want your files to be named a specific way, then make sure you put that proper name in here. You can just copy and paste. If you have a data sheet from the school that's got a column for the teacher, you can just use the teacher's name from that column and make a duplicate column and call it group ID. As long as two teachers don't have the same name, that is, you can do that, and that will work just fine. Now, the text items for the first and last name, and then the additional text, which I discussed in the prior video here. These are specific items for each image slot, so you'll have to have that text in each image slot. And for the case of the teacher and the principal, those are the only two that have this additional text row. So those are the only two that will have that. And I just realized I am missing... I'm missing one of the principal rows. Okay, so that brings me to the next point. I chose this template specifically for the reason of we want to create two templates or two composites, but we have an image of the principal that we want to be in every single composite. So if you have an image like that you know you're going to repeat in every single composite, you'll have to have a separate row with that image for each composite you want to make. So you can just copy and paste, and then you'll need to have the group ID for each composite you want to make. So the row will be identical, the same image name, same text, other than the group ID. You have Reynolds here and Sanders here. And these group IDs don't have to be all consecutive. They can be mixed up. It doesn't matter that it goes from Reynolds to Sanders to Reynolds. The program is smart enough to group these, and it's also smart enough to sort by last name for the order as well. So, and as a recap from the last video, it's going to put the teacher and the principal in those first two slots because we're forcing the order here, 1 and 2. 1 and 2 for teacher and principal. Now with the group level text, this is the text that's contained in the graphics file that is common to all the images. You only need that once per template or per composite. So for the Reynolds class, we've got a row here. For the Sanders class, we've got a row here that contains that text information. And even if you're doing memory mates where it does save one for each student, still in that case, you only need one, and it's only going to replace this one time. So even if you're doing memory mates, you cannot force different text per student in the group level main text areas of the template. Also, if it finds two of these in the same group, it's going to use the first one that it finds. So for instance, if you have conflicting data, like one row that says Challenger Elementary, one that says Fremont Elementary, and it's in the same group, it's going to use whichever one it finds first, and it's not necessarily the order that it's listed in the data file, because it's going to do its own sorting, and it's going to be whichever one gets sorted to the top based on last name or based on the force order. So whichever one it comes to first, it's going to use, and the other ones it will ignore. And last thing I'm going to repeat before I run, just because I talked about it in the last video, but it was probably 25 minutes into the video. So in case anybody missed that and didn't watch it all the way through, in the cases where you have accent marks like Nunez, these special characters, you'll need to save your file in a specific way. And if you have commas in your data, you cannot use a comma separated. You can use a .csv file extension, but you can't use a comma delimiter. So I'll show you how to set both of these. So if we, now let's go save as, and then I'll save with the same name. I'm in OpenOffice now, but Excel will have a similar way to do this. But if I hit Edit Filter Settings and hit Save, the field delimiter, if I have commas in the data, that means if there's commas in the file name or if there's commas in any of the text data, you will have to set your delimiter to something else, and you can use semicolon, colon, tab, or comma if there's no commas in your data. But since I have it, I'll just use semicolon. And if you've got special characters, you have to make sure your character set is set to Unicode UTF-8. The default, I'm pretty sure, is Western Europe, one of these Western Europes down here. That will not work with special characters. It must be Unicode UTF-8 because that's what the JavaScript plugins engine in Photoshop recognizes. And if you don't do that, any of these special characters will end up being just blank boxes or the default character in the font. Also, you need to make sure that your font supports the special characters as well. So if you're using some fonts you download off of websites you find, a lot of the font developers don't create characters for the non-English characters. So just keep that in mind. Make sure your font supports those. All right, now that we're ready to go here, I'm going to close the images and let's batch, and this should work. Yeah, anytime I've resaved the data file, I'll need to go back and reload that. Okay, so I got a data validation failed error. I'm not 100% sure why here. I might have a space in one of these columns here. So let's see. We save this again. Okay, it was an extra space in this column, which was there from the prior video when I was showing how to force, or I was showing things that can cause that error, and I left those extra spaces in that data from the prior video, if you made it that far in the video to see that. So anyways, it's loaded now. We're ready to go. And I'm just going to hit run. Oh, wait a minute. Make sure I got the right template selected, because I don't remember which one I did last year. All right, we're ready to go now. Let's just hit build. Oh, okay, so I see this pop up, and this happens when you're not in batch mode and you have multiple groups. Since I'm not in batch mode, it's asking me which group I want. So I know that I forgot to put it in batch mode. I'm just going to hit cancel and then go back and make sure I click on the batch mode here. And then the save folder. All right, we'll get there here. So, okay, should be ready to go now. All right, so it's finished building the composites. Let's take a look here. Now we just did 2, but you could do 100 if you wanted. It's really pretty simple. You just need to make sure, like I say, you get your group IDs set up properly for each class. And then the thing we did about duplicating the principal, usually you're not going to have to do that because most of the time you're not going to be putting the principal in there. I just showed that for demonstration just in case you needed that. All right, so now I'm going to run a batch with memory mate mode. You can do that. You can have batch checked and memory mate. So let me grab the template folder here. And then since the data items are a little bit different for each template, I do have a data sheet already set up for the memory mates, which is more or less just the same, but with different text layers and different text for that specific template. But the setup is exactly the same. And in this case, we don't have a principal in there, so we don't need to duplicate any rows. Yeah, I've got the memory mate CSV loaded. Okay, let's just hit build. So it's pretty much the exact same thing. It's going to build the batch identically. It's going to group the images the same based on the group ID column, but then it's just going to rotate through each kid and put them into the featured slot after it's built each composite. All right, the memory mate's finished. Those take a little bit longer because it's got to save a copy for each student. But let's take a look here in the save folder. And you can see we've got all of our class composites. And you can see with each group, the arrangement of images changes based on the class because there was a different number of images. And it saved them all in the same folder. So we've got both classes in the same folder here, but really pretty easy. Anyway, that about covers the batch processing.